Scott just made the point.
Jefferson seems to be a lot more secure, not just.
The latest Iowa GOP poll is out, and there's nary a professional Republican politician in sight at the top of it. In fact, Dr. Ben Carson, who's barely spent any time at all in Iowa in the past month, is now tied at the top with the bane of Reince Priebus, one Donald Trump. Former Hewlett-Packard CEO Carly Fiorina is in third, even though the Boys Club is trying to keep her out of the next primetime debate. Welcome to Trifecta, everyone. I'm Stephen Cruiser, and I'm filling in for Stephen Green today. Let's bring in your other two Trifecta regulars, Scott Ott and Bill Whittle. Gentlemen, as we try to figure out whether the GOP electorate has lost its mind, found its mind, or maybe just drank too much beer on an empty stomach, a little perspective might help us. At this point in the 2004 election, Joe Lieberman enjoyed a double-digit lead in the race for the Democratic nomination. During this same period in the 2008 cycle, Hillary Clinton and Rudy Giuliani were steamrolling their respective parties' nominations. Bill, should we just dismiss these numbers as early in the cycle polling jitters, or does the fact that the non-politicians are at the top of a very deep and talented field portend that the Republican Party may be about to undergo some painful growing pains, whether it wants to or not?
Yes. You're right in both counts. We should discount the numbers because it's so early. We've got people, basically, Steve, I think what the situation, let's just take Donald Trump as an example. Whatever his number is, let's just say for the sake of the argument, it's 40%. The question then becomes, can he hold on to the 40%? And as other people fall out of the race, will that number increase, or is 40% the biggest number he's ever going to get? I think that's the kind of questions we have to be asking in terms of how solid these numbers are. But to the much more important point that you raised, the much larger point, is simply this. You know who's not in this list, who's not even mentioned in this list, is Jeb Bush, who, despite every single insider in Washington will be foisted upon us, told us it's inevitable, there's absolutely no chance of anyone else, being able to steal this nomination away from the savvy, seasoned, no. I actually think he's in real danger of having to drop out of the race. I mean, he's barely at 5%, at 4%. So as I mentioned, I think in another segment, Donald Trump certainly deserves a medal struck in his honor for keeping Jeb Bush out of the race. So there's that. The fact that Ben Carson is there is, as you said, it is an indication. It is telling us something. For example, Steve, when you pointed out in the, I guess it was 2008 race, when Hillary was ahead or Giuliani was ahead or any of these other people are ahead, it's the leading person in a field of established politicians. What I think is signaling the noise here is that the two people who are showing serious numbers are both not only not career politicians, they're both anti-politicians. One is a billionaire businessman, the other one is an extremely successful surgeon. They are both stark naked in terms of their political history, and I think voters love that this time around.
To your point about Jeb, some of his big donors have fled him this week, finally. It looked like he was supposed to have all the money behind him forever, and now that's starting to move away from him, which, as you pointed out, Donald Trump deserves a big thank you for from anyone who cares about the future of the Republican Party.
You bet.
Scott, many conservatives like myself have found the plain-speaking, outsider ways of Donald Trump and Carly Fiorina so refreshing that we've been willing to overlook some of their less conservative comments and actions in the past. That's easy to do right now because it's early and we don't actually have to vote for anyone at the moment. Are hardcore conservatives so disgruntled with the GOP that we'll allow ourselves some wiggle room on principles when it comes to choosing a candidate, or do non-politicians get a little less scrutiny for what they've done as private citizens?
Yeah, I think you've got both of those factors in play. And sadly, I do think that a lot of this is going to go away. I don't know. It's kind of like when you're theoretically talking about, as a young lady is theoretically talking about who she might like to go to the dance with, and she's thinking, wow, wouldn't it be great to go with that guy who rides the Harley? But ultimately, when it comes down to it, she's not going to go to the dance with the guy who rides the Harley. She's going to go to the dance with the guy she knows is going to come dressed in the appropriate tux. And so she doesn't want to embarrass herself. And I think some of that is going to happen. I mean, like, I was all excited about Fred Thompson. You remember Fred Thompson? He's an actor now, as he was before. So he's not president of the United States. And so I think that we need to have this flirtation. We need to do this, if nothing else, than to scare the establishment and let them know, look, we're not going to be taken for granted. And I'll tell you, there's one thing that's really going in favor of these people who want a Fiorina or want a Trump or a Carson or stuff like that. And people say, well, they're not conservative enough. Oh, really? Well, tell me about the conservatives that we've actually elected in the past who, once they got in office, were able to implement conservative ideas, not just talk about them, not just fight for us, but actually put in place conservative legislation. And that list gets really short. And so we're thinking, well, what does it matter if we got somebody who's not that conservative? The conservatives haven't done anything for us in the past.
There you have it, boys and girls. Scott Ott likens us to the teenage girls flirting with the bad boy, waiting for prom here. But you're right about that, too. But I think this time it's not just a prom thing. It's like a marriage thing where, you know, we've been with the good guy who turns out to be a bad guy, and now the dude on the Harley is looking better because, you know what, at least he had the sense to go do something fun, and he can afford a Harley. So let's go with that. You know, folks, there's a certain type of earthquake, as Bill knows, that we get here in Southern California that you can hear before you feel it. And even after you've been through dozens of them, you often get caught off guard. I feel that a political version of that kind of earthquake may be in the offing here. There have been warning signs, small and large, for the last 6 years that the center-right electorate was losing its patience with both the Democrats and the Republicans. After coalescing almost overnight into a powerful movement that pulled the GOP from the political abyss in 2009, the party soon realized that it might not be able to control these people. Rather than thank them for delivering decisive victories in 2010 and 2014, the Republican establishment has done nothing but yell louder when telling conservatives to shut up. Ironically, after years of trying to sell us on candidates that were merely less awful than whichever faux commie the Democrats were running that year, the Republicans do have a serious amount of quality people running this year. Unfortunately, they are dealing with a base that is experiencing extreme politician fatigue and is most definitely tired of being lied to by the upper echelons of the GOP. So those candidates aren't being heard as loudly as they'd like at the moment. While it is still very early in this election cycle, as we pointed out, I can hear the rumbling in the distance. We may very well have reached a point where a significant number of voters the GOP has depended upon for decades are willing to watch the party suffer for its sins, and that is entirely the party's fault. For Bill Whittle and Scott Ott and everyone here at PJTV, I'm Stephen Cruiser. Thank you very much for watching.